Monkey D. Luffy, one of the 4 Emperors of the Sea and captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. He's got just about everything that you could ever want in a great pirate captain. He has unparalleled ambition, stopping at nothing to achieve his dream of becoming Pirate King. Throughout the story, he inspires some unwavering loyalty in his crew and believes in each of them just as much as they believe in him. And on top of that, he now also has the power to back it all up. He will step up to anybody who stands in between him and the One Piece or his friends, and has a super powerful crew on top of everything. For real, they are the main guys, but don't sleep on the Straw Hats, y'all. Even the so-called weakling trio has some truly insane feats under their belts at this point. So, is Luffy just the best captain out of the 148 yes that do exist in the series? Because it kind of seems like he's got it all: power, ambition, loyalty, his crew. But I actually think that something is still missing from this list. Something that personally I would want in a real pirate captain, and that's some brains to go with just the brawn. And that's not to say that Luffy is a total moron. His battle IQ and emotional intelligence are pretty much off the charts. But you know what I mean, like making a thoughtful plan and actually sticking to that plan. Yeah, no. Things usually end up working out in the end just because of Luffy's fierce determination and raw power, but on the strategy side of things, well, he's just kind of allergic to any kind of actual solid plan, typically choosing to just completely ignore a plan that existed and rush in headfirst, oftentimes putting many of his allies in danger in the process. Now, I'm happy to admit that he's been getting a little bit better at this in some of the more recent arcs, but he's definitely not the one making the plan, right? He just manages to follow instructions for like roughly a minute. Point is, if I'm saying that Luffy isn't the best captain in One Piece, who could be? Which characters can actually stack up to the protagonist? Which captains have it all? The power, the ambition, the loyalty, the crew, and even the brains as well. Which of all of these captains have it, and which ones absolutely don't? And first up on the search for the best captain in the series, let's take a look at some of the captains who surpass Luffy in this very particular area: strategic mastery. You know, the ones who have the brains as well as the bronze, starting with one of Luffy's closest allies, Trafalgar Law. And I think it goes without saying objectively that Law is one of the coolest characters in the entire series. Pretty much everyone loves Law. My friend who I finally convinced to read One Piece even texted me out of the blue the other day just to say, I just got to Punk Hazard and Law is my dad now. And listen, friend, I get it. Stealing hearts is pretty much this dude's entire thing. Dude leaves me in shambles every single time. He's got a tragic backstory connected to Doflamingo, but he worked his way up through the world, becoming a supernova, then a warlord on his quest for revenge, and now he's out to discover the true history and meaning of the Will of D. And easily one of Law's most defining features is that very big, beautiful, juicy brain of his. Are brains juicy? I guess that's a good thing. He's a medical doctor after all. Word on the street where I live is that you've got to be pretty kind of smart to do that kind of thing. Law is a strategist who's fine with playing the very, very long game. We saw this very clearly when he became a warlord and formed his alliance with Luffy solely because he was trying to get Kaido to take down Doffy at some point in the future. He wasn't just gonna rush in and throw hands like Luffy likes to do every single time. He was gonna get his enemies to take out each other through sheer cunning and manipulation. And if we're being honest, he was even using Luffy at first before he was then actually pulled in by Luffy's undeniable charisma and good nature. But while he is very smart, he is also lacking some other important elements that Luffy does have instead. Even having one of the most busted devil fruits in the entire verse, he just doesn't have the real raw power he needs to seize his own dreams. He had to fully rely on Luffy to take out Doflamingo after Doffy both outsmarted him and then nearly outright killed him. And he couldn't of course take out a Yonko by himself. He had to team up with Kid in order to manage that. And more recently, he was completely devastated by Blackbeard, largely because he can't rely on his crew the way that Luffy can on his. And that actually makes Law a super interesting character because, don't get me wrong, as much as I love Beppo, Law's almost a one-man crew really, with, you know, some friends who help drive his submarine pretty much. He's almost like the best aspects of the Straw Hats rolled into one single character because he's a doctor like Chopper, he has a sword like Zoro, he's intrigued by ancient history like Robin, he's a strategist like Sanji and Usopp, and he's pretty much a jack of all trades, but a master of none, because for all of his crazy skills, he couldn't take on a full force of a Yonko crew with his power alone, and as good as they are at swimming, the Heart Pirates did not stand close to a chance against an Emperor's crew. Actually, kind of like another supernova who teamed up with Luffy to take down a Yonko, because leave it to Oda to take Capone Beige, a dude who just looks like your generic mafia boss, and actually turn him into one of my favorite supernova and maybe the best dad in all of One Piece? Question mark. Not that there is particularly a lot of competition, but still. Beige is also a character who really plays the long game, largely to seek revenge for Big Mom's treatment of his wife Chiffon and her twin sister Lola. He embedded himself in Big Mom's crew and earned her trust, so at first it looked like a Hawkins or a Pooh situation. But no, his spirit actually wasn't broken by Big Mom, he was just waiting for his chance to strike, and it came once he was able to pull in Luffy and the very mysterious and enigmatic Gangster Gastino. Does anyone know who Gangster Gastino actually is? I have a few theories, but if someone can let me know, that would be awesome. Also, Beige is honestly a top tier captain as well. He's got a really solid crew and a great deal of power himself, and thanks to his castle fruit, his teamwork is top notch since he can literally have his crew inside of him at all times. Which sounds bad, but you get what I mean. On paper, he kind of has it all, but just not at the level that it actually takes to shoot for the top. And actually, another great strategist that isn't even close to the top is actually Don Creek. Surprised to see him this early in the video? Well, you shouldn't be, because I'm talking about every captain in One Piece. Remember, look at the timestamp. We haven't basically not even started this video. It's a long one. This dude here is also all about preparation and strategy, but from more of a treacherous and deceptive angle, right? Like, he built up a massive fleet, utilized his resources, loads himself up with armor and poison and the like, any underhanded tactic really he can use to get a leg up. It's just a bit of a shame that under all of that armor, he's just crazy weak. Like, I'm not even sure he is a captain anymore now that he's hanging out on Hachinosu following our next captain, Blackbeard, who strangely actually has a lot in common with Creek when it comes to the strategy angle and the underhanded tactics. And let's be real here, there is truly no longer long game in the story than the one that Marshall D. Teach has been playing for around a couple of decades at this point on Whitebeard's ship, waiting for his moment to strike and then putting his plan into action. He had this entire 4D chess strategy that brought him right to Emperor status, and he's aiming even higher than that to rule over the world. Right now, he's about to be the world government's biggest problem, and it's really all their fault because the man that Teach became was born in the tragedy of God Valley, where the government killed the Davy clan and Teach's own father, Rox D. Zebek. Davy D. Zebek. And actually, kind of like Luffy, he pretty much has got it all. Power? Yeah, he's the one dude in the world who has eaten 2 devil fruits, and they're both crazy broken. He managed to scar Shanks before he had these fruits and lived to tell the tale. His crew is also beyond formidable, consisting of some of the world's most dangerous prisoners and a literal former admiral. And a lot of these crewmates do seem to have genuine respect for Teach and his dreams. And I think he would be a great candidate for one of the best captains in this entire video if it weren't for 2 big problems. The first is cowardice, because unlike Luffy, who's always willing to throw down with opponents several times stronger than himself and very much, being like, hey, if I die today, it happens, Blackbeard is very quick to employ a little bit more of a, let's call it strategic retreat. He's not gonna go up against anyone he isn't absolutely certain he can defeat. And secondly, Blackbeard does not care enough about his crew actually. I mean, on a crew like the Straw Hats, the respect pretty much goes both ways. But even with the greatest assets in his crew, the Titanic Captains, he's just absolutely willing to throw any of them under the bus if it benefits his own goals. I think this became especially clear on Amazon Lily when he was completely willing to let his crewmates remain statues if it meant getting his hands on Hancock's fruit. And actually, speaking of Boa Hancock, the Pirate Empress is up next in a category I'm gonna call ruling by fear. And those are the captains who don't just inspire and motivate their crewmates also follow them out of fear. These captains rule by power and by force. And that at first might sound a little bit weird if you're thinking of the infatuated, love sickness obsessed with Luffy Hancock. yeah, right, like that vibe. But come on, let's not forget the world's most beautiful pirate's tragic backstory. At just 12 years old, she was caught and forced into slavery with her sisters, forcibly fed her devil fruit just as entertainment for the world nobles. She was then branded with the hoof of the soaring dragon, and as such, never ever lets anyone see her back. Until Luffy, of course. Now, thankfully, thanks to the efforts of Fisher Tiger, she was freed and returned to Amazon Lily to reign as Empress, and after that experience, she's not taken any nonsense whatsoever, except from Luffy. The Kuja pirates have this total admiration and loyalty for the captain, but part of that is because she rules her crew with a very iron fist. Iron high heel? I don't know. Don't forget that just like Blackbeard, she almost let one of her own petrified crewmates crumble, and that it was actually Luffy who saved the statue of Marguerite from Hancock's own wrath. But this is of course nothing compared to another female captain, so let's skip past the warlords and get onto the Yonko with Big Mom. Big Mom is undoubtedly one of the strongest characters in the series. I think it would be foolish to deny that. She killed a giant chieftain as a child, as a 6-year-old. She was on the infamous Rocks Pirates crew, and she ascended to being an emperor pretty easily afterwards. But despite her Yonko status, Charlotte Lin Lin might just be one of the single worst pirate captains we have seen in the entire show. But before we get into all those negatives, let's quickly see what positives Big Mom has in her column. I mean, yes, she is super powerful, her devil fruit mastery is quite unparalleled, and her haki is truly insane. And she has got an insanely broken fleet with a massive territory under her control in the New World too. But does she inspire faith and loyalty in her crew? Hardly. First off, the vast majority of her crew are just her own children, and they don't exactly follow her out of admiration for her great qualities. They obey her out of fear and retribution. Because when her kids don't obey her every command, she strips their souls away, which is very crazy. And when she's hangry, she wreaks absolute devastation on her own islands, leaving her kids to clean up the mess. Even Katakuri, her strongest sweet commander, basically asked Luffy to return to Whole Cake Island one day to take on his mom before retiring from their fight for a nice long nap. Meanwhile, she's got other traitors like Beige hiding in their crew, just waiting for the opportunity to turn on her and take her out. If it weren't for her stupid amount of individual strength and passive haki buff, the crew would just completely have fallen apart already. She truly shows that ruling by fear alone just can't compare to leading by example, like Luffy does, kind of like the captain who tried to take over Fishman Island, one of her previous territories. I don't need to tell you that Hody Jones is a very, very bad captain too. For starters, he's weak. So weak that he needed to rely on performance-enhancing drugs to even compete. Don't take steroids, kids, even if you see it on TikTok. Don't. Alright, and like a lot of the other characters in this category, he downright abuses his own crew, even using them as fish shields during the battle with the Straw Hats. He was willing to kill any fellow fisherman who showed any sympathy for humans whatsoever. And this is of course totally counter to those captains who have mad respect for their crew and from their crew. This level of mutual respect is, I think, very crucial for a true captain, and leads us to the next section: respect. And one of those captains who embodies mutual respect is surprisingly Hody Jones' inspiration. No matter how misguided they were, Arlong did hold principles close to his heart that his crewmates wholeheartedly believed in. After all, he used to be a member of the Sun Pirates and was inspired by their legendary captain, Fisher Tiger. But after his death, he and Jinbei had very different ideas about the Sun Pirates' future, so Arlong went his own way to fight not for equality, but for fishman supremacy. And contrary to Hody Jones, who used his own crewmates as human shields, Arlong got big mad when Luffy used one of Arlong's pirates as a shield instead, which I don't know if you've ever noticed, but Luffy uses human shields like a weird amount in the story. Like, it's kind of concerning how often he does it. It's happened like several times in the show, but I'll give him a pass since it's not his own allies, and who cares about fodder? Am I right? No moral problems there at all. Arlong treats most of his crewmates like family is my point. They're kind of like brothers to him. He might be a contender for a pretty great captain if he treated all of his crewmates this way, but he was outright evil and manipulative to Nami, and I will never ever forgive him for that. Now, another wildly evil dude who treats his crew surprisingly well is Luffy, actually. This warlord was born on top of the world as a celestial dragon, but after his father renounced that title and moved to the surface of the world, he's been clawing his way back to the top ever since. Don Quixote Doflamingo conquered Dressrosa, seeing it as his Don Quixote birthright, and made himself a centerpiece of the criminal underworld, basically by stepping over and on everyone on his path there. He absolutely won't stand for betrayal, going as far as killing his own brother, who he actually somewhat cared for. However, for the crew members who are loyal to him, he actually does seem to genuinely care about them and their well-being. When he did learn of certain crewmates being defeated by the Straw Hats, he got absolutely mad. He got irate. Combine this with his crazy level of power and his ability as a strategic mastermind, Doflamingo is actually a really great captain when all's said and done, I think. He's just a great captain who's a very bad person. But you know who's actually a great person? It's you. Yeah, thanks for stopping and watching this video. If you'd like to support the channel and what we do here, and help me make bigger and better content, consider checking out Patreon. Little plug here, for as little as $2 a month, you get rewards like early chapter reactions, downloadable artwork from my amazing art team, and even if you can't pay right now, we do have a free weekly newsletter with everything that's going on in the One Piece world. Now, with that being said, back to the video, plug over. Another warlord who treats his crew better than you may actually remember is Gekko Moria, or shall I say, Kozuki Moria. All I'm saying is, don't judge a goth by its cover, y'all, because Moria actually inspires the utmost loyalty and respect from his crewmates, and does the same thing for them. Again, with the recent very wild cover story revelation that he's actually a member of the Kozuki clan, I need to know more about his backstory, but what we do know is that his original crew got completely wiped out by Kaido back in the day, and that loss is what turned Moria into the version of him that we see today, wanting to rely on zombies, so he never ever has to go through the pain of losing another crewmate ever again. And some of those living crewmates he does have are the worst people, like Hawkback and Absalom might quite literally be some of the most reprehensible characters in all of One Piece, but Moria will literally risk his own life to save them, like when he pulled straight up to Hachinosu to rescue Absalom from Blackbeard's crew. And I mean, yes, technically he was too late to do that, but unlike Moria, I'm glad to live in a world without Absalom in it. Perona even gave up a cozy life with Dracul Mihawk to return to her captain. And I'm also gonna throw Urouge in this category because he and his crew seem pretty tight, but I'm gonna need Urouge to actually do something, anything, please, in the story before I can say much more about him as a captain. But this actually already brings me to another category of characters, which are captains of subordinate crews. And captains in this category definitely don't have the sauce to stack up to a captain like Luffy, because these guys don't have the ambition to shoot for stuff like Pirate King themselves. Instead, even though they're independent crews technically, they do swear loyalty to a different, stronger pirate captain instead. Kind of like those in the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. I mean, this guy here wants to be the king of his own nation, but he also has to contend with the fact that he doesn't have the same ludicrous strength as his brother Loki. But despite being next in line for king, he owes Luffy and God Usopp a big solid one, so the new giant pirates are under control of the Straw Hats, even if Luffy would rather they weren't. Let's see how we think about Hajujin at the end of the Elbaf arc. And Bartolomeo is an even weirder case because long before he even met Luffy, he already formed his entire crew as a Luffy fan club. Truly becoming a member crew of the Grand Fleet fulfilled this dude's ultimate dream already, but Bardo, I still kinda love him, man. If you're still alive, who knows? And then along with these two here are the other captains, all of whom are deeply indebted to Luffy for straight up saving all of their lives during Dressrosa. We've got Leo, Sai, Cavendish, Ideo, and Orlumbus. And some of these guys are legends in their very own rights. I mean, Orlumbus has got a massive fleet that's now under Straw Hat control, even though no one in the Straw Hats is actually controlling it, which is weird. But yeah, Leo and Sai were bold enough to attack celestial dragons during the Reverie, and Cavendish, well, that Hakuba inside him doesn't mess around either. But some other subordinate captains don't follow another crew because they owe them a great debt. For example, Shanks' subordinate crews just follow along for their own protection because they're just super weak. Sorry to Oli, Garotini, Fugar, Pururu, and Linaria, but I gotta call it like I see it. You guys, don't have the juice to be in the New World. You should probably go somewhere else to be pirates. And I can't forget about Blackbeard Subordinate Captain, Peachbeard either. Well, actually I could. You probably did too because he's pretty forgettable. Peachbeard is a captain under Blackbeard's flag, and we saw him pull up to Lulusia only to get clowned on by the Revolutionary Army immediately. Apparently, Blackbeard is really just trying to collect more and more beard colors to join his side, I guess. Though, while we are on the topic of Blackbeard again, this might be a good time too to mention that I'm not counting the 10 Titanic captains on this list. Even though they technically do have the title of captain, they're not actually in charge of the whole crew. They have their own ship, but they are following Blackbeard very much directly. So if you want to hear more about them, you're gonna have to wait for the inevitable Every Division Commander Explained video. If you want to see that, let me know in the comments. Now, of course, I can't talk about subordinate crews without talking about the ones who were allied with Whitebeard either. These allied captains are the ones who pulled up to Marineford to help Whitebeard try to rescue Ace. And what's actually insane is that there are 43 of them. Yeah. And if you're keeping track, that is quite literally 29% of all the captains we have met in One Piece. Basically, 1/3 of the named captains we know about are these Whitebeard captains who got barely any screen time, but some are some absolute legends, I would say, like Little Oars Jr., a literal descendant of the Continent Puller. Some of them, like the baddie here, Whitey Bay, used to be a full-fledged member of the Whitebeard Pirates before becoming a captain in their own right. And Squart here, well, this guy's just a traitor. Bro, Whitebeard might forgive you, but you're not getting any pass from me, man. All right, and then let's take a big deep breath and get through all 43 of these guys. Badgely is what I'm going with for this guy. And who could forget the Deckelven brothers? You remember them, right? Alright, a lot of these captains are pretty forgettable. I probably pronounced some of them drastically wrong, but these twin co-captains are actually a perfect transition to the next group of captains. Sharing is caring, because some captains don't want all the glory for just themselves. Nah, instead they divide the hefty responsibilities that the captain has between two different people, whether it's a bro or a butt. And by their very nature, like subordinate captains, these guys mostly don't have what it takes to really play in the big leagues. I mean, if they did reach Laugh Tale, what are they gonna do, huh? Cut the One Piece in half and be pirate kings? I don't think so. And one set of brothers that definitely aren't cut out for the top tier status are Karibu and Koribu, the co-captains of the Karibu Pirates. And yes, you heard that right. Karibu is not the captain of the Karibu Pirates. He shares that responsibility with his brother. And I don't know what it is. I'm definitely sensing a little bit of a power imbalance here, but Karibu definitely doesn't rank highly as far as captains overall go. When he was a captain, he was perfectly fine giving up that title to follow the fake Straw Hats of all people, and now he just wants to give all of his dirty little secrets over to Blackbeard. Neither of these brothers is true good captain material, I would say. And then we got a couple brothers and a +1 for One Piece's only captain threesome. Wait, that doesn't sound quite right. Captain Trio? Yeah, let's go with Trio. Right. Mont Blanc Cricket, Masira, and Shoujo of the Saruyama Alliance. These three are all captains who've created an alliance, not to search for the One Piece, but to find a multitude of other treasures buried on the sea floor, which does make them one of the best crews when it comes to actually finding treasure. You know, that thing that pirates are known for, especially now that we know that half the world has been flooded. And then things get a little bit giant-sized with Dory and Broggy of the Giant Warrior Pirates. These two are finally back to leading their crew after a, quick 100-year detour on Little Garden. And as big warriors of Elbaf, these guys strike absolute fear into the hearts of the world, with their bounties being 1.8 billion berries each, adjusted for inflation is what apparently happened in the story. And these guys don't mess around either. They earned that bounty, because even though we remember them from pre-time skip and fairly early during the pre-time skip at that, they did pull up to Egghead Island and took on the Gorosei in their demon forms. Their crew is pretty much all about adventure, but I'm kind of hesitant to call them effective co-captains when they basically spent a full century quarreling instead of putting their differences aside and, I don't know, actually leading their crew. But before them, the Giant Warrior Pirates were led by another pair of giants. That's the perfect entry to my next category, because for one reason or another, these guys just couldn't cut it in piracy and have just given up on being captains instead. We're talking about the co-captains Jarul and Jorul, who led the Giant Warrior Pirates for 300 years. The only problem here is with Jorul being one of the oldest living One Piece characters in the series, we don't ever actually see these two as captains ever. We see them as the co-chiefs of Elbaf after they've already passed on that title to Dory and Broggy. But these two were renowned in their day, but even with a giant's lifespan, things just can't last forever, particularly for Jarul, who Big Mom sent into, let's say, an early retirement. And the same actually goes for Don Chinjao, who's long past his pirating prime by the time that he fights Luffy in the Colosseum on Dressrosa, but we do get to see a little bit of his pirate days when he actually fought Garp. But nowadays, he's just the old patriarch of the Chinjao family after spending time in the Hapo Navy, which now attaches Jinjiao to Sai, and as such, the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. But if there is one pirate that I am absolutely dying to see at his prime as a pirate, it's gotta be Sanji's mentor and real dad, Red Leg Zeph. Back in his days, this master chef braved the Grand Line and probably even made it to the New World, since he calls the Grand Line a paradise. Now, of course, we don't sadly know a lot about him as a pirate, but if he ran his ship anything like he runs his restaurant, then he was probably a pretty fierce leader, worthy of the respect his cooks or his crewmates already give him now. Some other captains don't get out of the pirate game though because they're too old, they just find a new career path that they're just better suited to. That's for instance the case for Walpole, who had a very short-lived career as a pirate, because once Blackbeard started terrorizing Drum Island, Walpole was forced to flee with his followers and they just assumed the role of pirates in order to survive. This was more of like a temporary measure until he could get back to Drum Island and reclaim his throne, and I have a feeling that he was just as bad as being a captain as he was being a king, but hey, who knows, he's back in the story now, maybe he'll do something interesting. And this also didn't last long, of course, because Luffy was there to dethrone him right away, and he didn't go back to piracy this time. Instead, he tried something new, capitalism, and founded the evil Black Drum Kingdom with funds from his new toy empire. Of course, now he's on the run again since he, accidentally saw the secret ruler of the world, Emu, and Django also made a very dramatic career shift. With these moonwalk moves, he could have made his fortune as a Michael Jackson impersonator, but instead, he quit piracy and switched to the other side, becoming a soldier for the Marines. And hey, I would enlist too if it meant Hina was bossing me around. I don't blame him, but he was named captain of the Black Hat Pirates technically after Kudo decided to retire to commit financial fraud instead. Even when Django was a captain, he was really still just following orders, it seems, so this one's a bit of a shaky candidate. So instead, let's just move on to Kudo himself, the former captain of the Black Hat Pirates, because this guy was pretty formidable when it came to East Blue villains, but one day he just decided that this whole, piracy thing was just a little bit too much effort, too tiresome, all the being chased around by the Marines. He was so over it. So yeah, I would say that Kudo definitely didn't have what it took to tussle with a true captain, as evidenced enough by getting stomped by an East Blue level Luffy. The same is kind of true of the former Empress of Amazon Lily and captains of the Kuja Pirates. And I will say love sickness was a big factor in some of these, like Gloriosa's infatuation with Roger that led her straight to the Rocks crew. Then Shaki was just over the whole pirate Empress life too. She just wanted a chill life serving drinks, and that's exactly what she got alongside the love of her life, Rayleigh. By the way, the best romance in all of One Piece. Oh. And as for Tritoma, well, we don't really know that much about her yet other than her very brief appearance, but I still think that her Luffy mom stocks are at least rising at the moment. This might or might not turn out to be true at the end, we'll see. And since Tritoma is confirmed to be dead, there might actually be a much more tragic reason for her reign as captain ending than just wanting to settle down like the other two empresses before her. And actually, while we're on the lovey-dovey stuff here with the Kuja pirate captains, I'm gonna just throw Lola quickly in here as well. This daughter of Big Mom set out to sea with one goal in mind: find herself a fine man. And while she hasn't officially disbanded her crew just yet, I can definitely see that happening soon now that she's married to Gaudi of the Fire Tank Pirates. Oh, and Culcho Yorkie of the Rumbar Pirates also didn't retire by choice, because after coming down with an incurable disease, he stranded himself on an island to die so he wouldn't infect his own crewmates. And honestly, that's just a top-tier captain move. I mean, that level of self-sacrifice reminds me a little bit of Luffy, somebody who's always willing to put his own life on the line for the rest of his crew, leading by example. And it kind of makes sense that the next captain of the Rumba Pirates would then go on to join the Straw Hats, which brings us, yes, to Brook, which kind of starts off our category of pirate captains who quit their own crew in order to join another crew. And this is a little bit like the Subordinate Captains, but they take it the next step further, dissolving their previous crews to serve a new captain. And don't get me wrong, some of these were great captains in their own rights, but believed in a dream of someone else with even greater will or ambition, more than they believed in pursuing piracy with themselves in the captain's seat. Brook was selected as the next captain of the Rumbar Pirates by the rest of the crew. I mean, he had the experience to back it up since he was once some kind of military commander, and apparently even knows some of the Holy Knights, since it also looks like he's about to get a second backstory by Oda involving Gunko, one of the Holy Knights. Maybe Brook is a Holy Knight, but anyways, his leadership position on the Rumbar Pirates was very short-lived, of course, once they actually ran face first into Brook's tragic backstory, leaving him the only person alive / dead as a skull. Anyways, but once the Straw Hats found him several decades later, I keep forgetting how dark Brook's backstory is, he was more than happy to yo-ho-ho his way onto the crew as the Straw Hats magician. And as you know, Brook's of course not the only former captain in the Straw Hats either, because Jimbei was the captain of the legendary Sun Pirates. And this wasn't so much a Brook situation where it was just a temporary and short-lived measure either. Jimbei had principles. He had dreams. The Sun Pirates were actively fighting for the rights of fishmen everywhere. They were all striving towards a world where fishmen could coexist with humans on the surface. The thing is, those ideals might have prevented him from being the best captain that he could be, because in order to strengthen ties between the species, he took the title of a warlord, ultimately restricting what the Sun Pirates could have maybe done. But as we're seeing in the Albert flashback, getting closer to the government can be a real double-edged sword. But even Jimbei, a former warlord, captain of a legendary crew, couldn't deny Luffy's dream and will. Jimbei recognizes that Luffy accomplishing his big goal will ultimately accomplish his own as a byproduct, especially after seeing Luffy liberate Fishman Island from the attempted takeover by our favorite guy, Hody Jones, who is in this video a lot for no reason. And so by working together with Luffy, he knows that he can fight for greater freedom and equality throughout the entire One Piece world. Even Luffy's brother Ace gave up his spot as captain of the Spade Pirates to then become a member of the Whitebeard Pirates, and even brought his entire crew along with him. And I do think that it's really saying something that he believed in Whitebeard so much, because he was a pretty great captain in his own right, even being offered a spot as a warlord shortly before that. But he instead believed in Whitebeard becoming the next Pirate King, and ironically, Whitebeard was actually secretly raising up Ace to become king of the pirates instead and take over the crew after he was gone. And it would have worked too if it weren't for those meddling donuts. Arr. A few others who chose this path of joining another crew are Jean Bart, who joined up with Law after being freed from slavery on Sabaody Archipelago, but before that, he was once the captain of his very own crew. Lip Service Doughty and Albion were also captains who, kind of like Haribo, tried to join up with the fake Straw Hats. Then there is Kibagairu, who, well, he actually didn't willingly join another crew. He got Davy backfighted right into Foxy's crew, which is absolutely terrible. Then there are the former captains who made the questionable choice of deciding to throw their lot in with Buggy the Clown of all people, which, I mean, I guess actually ended up working out very well for them by just dumb luck. Alvida was quite literally the first pirate captain that Luffy ever defeated in the story, and she joined up with the Buggy Pirates afterwards, and is technically part of a Yonko crew now, I guess. Crazy. And then we have the very interesting case of Richie. Yes, that Richie. The Lion. Bet you didn't know that Richie was a pirate captain. Well, it was fairly short-lived, but during one of the cover stories, after Buggy got yeeted by Luffy in Orangetown, it was actually Richie who became the interim captain while Buggy was away. Kabaji and Moji actually fought each other for the position, but it was the Lion who came out on top. His reign was very short-lived because soon enough Buggy of course came back, but still, fun fact in case you didn't know that. Let's get back to the more heavy hitters here though, with Jewelry Bonnie. Well, she's on the Thousand Sunny, and now that she's back to being a kid, I could actually totally see her joining the crew as cabin boy, cabin girl. I'll gender the cabin boy to cabin girl. What are you gonna do? Even though she actually became very significant to, being a supernova, her crew was just some random dudes from her own town. Like really, they were more like babysitters cosplaying as pirates. They didn't know what they were doing. They just wanted to make sure she's safe. And now she's already reached her own goal, which is finding her daddy Kuma. So I'm not really sure if Bonnie is still a captain at all. I could definitely see her giving up that role and just joining with Luffy or staying in Elbaf, especially now that she knows that Luffy is the sun god. And how about some more supernovas that joined up with a new crew? I mean, both Hawkins and Apu tried to step up to Kaido, and that did not go well for them. Kaido made them both bend the knee, making Hawkins the person who most fit the name headliner and turned Apu into a glorified DJ, basically. Honestly, with a power like that, it would have been a better career choice from the beginning in general. But hey, who am I to judge, right? DS Drake, or X-Drake, also was a subordinate of Kaido, but did so willingly. But also, does he, actually count as a captain since he was really a double agent for Sword? Also, his entire crew, was that Marines, or was that actual pirates that he then just threw under the bus? Just asking. And actually, it could be worth mentioning the Flying Six, or Toby Roppo, here as well, because both Sasaki and Who's Who were pirate captains as well at some point, who also had their spirits broken with Kaido and then rose up through the ranks of the Toby Roppo, both of them gunning for spots as all-stars at some point if they could just take out Jack, who honestly, probably not that hard. So you could say even though they swore to follow Kaido, I guess they weren't entirely without any ambition anymore, but some others give up their captain spots for some other reasons. Not for protection, not for debt, but because their ambitions were straight up beaten out of them, or in some cases, just beaten to death. I mean, these former captains definitely could not cut it, right? Despite in some cases being very powerful and very ambitious. But especially in the One Piece world, there's always somebody stronger out there, and sometimes you run into them at the wrong time. And who better to, start off this batch here than Eustace Kid. Once upon a time, this man was absolutely set up to be a chief rival and equal to Luffy. He had just as much ambition, he was aiming straight for the top, he had collected poneglyph rubbings, he didn't back down after he lost an arm to Shanks, and unlike the other supernova, he didn't bow down to Kaido. Just like Luffy, he took down a Yonko, well, with Law's help anyways, and he was a fearsome captain with a loyal crew, and then he was just one-shot by Shanks. Is he alive? Probably, honestly. Is he utterly defeated, though? Absolutely. And Kid isn't the only one who got beaten so badly by Yonko they were forced out of piracy, because when Pedro and the Nox pirates tried to take on Big Mom, they did not stand a chance either. Instead, the Nox pirates were done for, and Pedro went back to Zou while patiently waiting for the new dawn to come. Others can't even say they were really beaten by a Yonko. I mean, Diaz Barrels, father to Diaz Drake, was a pirate captain who was killed during the botched sail of the Opi Opi no Mi to Doflamingo, and Brownbeard here got taken out by Basil Hawkins before being turned into a twisted science experiment on Punk Hazard. Yikes. Others ended up straight up in jail, or worse, because we briefly met former Captain Devil Diaz on Sabaody Archipelago during the first introduction to the Celestial Dragons, because this guy had been enslaved and forced to carry around a Tenryubito family, and when he tried to escape, his bomb collar went off, taking him out of commission altogether. And then we've just got a candidate for straight up worst pirate captain in the entire series, which is Damalo Black, and if you don't recognize him by name, you'll probably remember him as the captain of, yes, the fake Straw Hats, who's currently rotting in Impel Down after making a career pivot to being the captain of the fake Kid Pirates. I hope you agree that Damalo Black has certified 0% of the qualities of a great captain. He's got no strength of his own, he's literally just like riding on the coattails of other cooler pirates, and I mean, Kid's not even that cool, you know, trying to trick other people into following him on their reputation alone. Straight up just very pathetic. Then we have Captain John. Now, we don't know how he bit the dust yet, but we do know he did at some point, since we saw him as one of the zombies on Thriller Bark. However, he must have done something right as a captain, since he amassed a great treasure that Buggy dreamt of finding one day. I mean, really, he might just be the most pirate of all the pirate captains, if that were a category. The dude is always boozing and pillaging, like a more magnetic Jack Sparrow, and another former Rocks pirate, Shiki the Golden Lion, also met a bit of defeat at the hands of Garp and Sengoku after Roger's death. However, in his prime, and who knows, maybe even right now, he was a very solid captain, building up an enormous fleet and acting as a rival to Roger himself. If he hadn't been thrown in the slammer, he might have been a contender to become one of the Yonko himself, but don't count Shiki out quite yet. He broke out of Impel Down a long time ago, and he might just be waiting to make his big move someday. Very soon, or possibly not. Who knows? Some other captains that are definitely not going to make any big moves, though, are the small-time captains that are barely present in the story. Before we get to the all-timers, the captains who are truly the greatest pirate captains in the entire series, we've quickly got to cover these guys first, because when I say, you know, we're talking about every captain in One Piece, I meant that. Look at the time. It's a long video. We're gonna do them all. They make some very quick appearances, obviously, whether that's in the main story, cover stories, or even some flashbacks. So let's just work our way through here. There is Roshio, who only existed to get beaten up by Bellamy and Jaya. Mikazuki, who only existed to get beat up by the Galela shipwrights. That's a bit of a trend here I'm sensing. Honestly, some of these captains really only exist in the story to hype up some other captains, you know, some cooler characters. Seamars here is interesting because he's the space pirate from NL's cover story, which is very mind-blowing in its own ways and goes into so much that might be true about the One Piece universe, but at the same time, again, really only exists to get beat up by Enno. Haritsu Kenryo is a captain that was captured by Kid and then crucified. Yikes. You didn't have to go that hard on that guy, Eustace, but Crabhand Gyro was a captain that got beat up by the New Fisherman Pirates. Tsukade Tainen got beat up by Beige in his cover story. Raccoon gets beat up by Ace and Teach in one of the One Piece novels, and Poopoo got wrecked by Crocodile during his introduction. And the fact that his name is Poop, is it Papu? Maybe it's Poo-Poo. I don't know. Then there is Macro, not to be confused with Marco, who's a fisherman captain from Hachan's cover story. Eureka here showed up to cause some problems in Django's cover story, but was beat up by the Marine Full Body. Candy got beaten up by CP9 in their cover story. I swear, a ton of these guys are also just in the cover stories, you know, just to give them some type of antagonist, really. Goo had his shadow stolen by Moria. Lakuba was a slave at Sabaody Archipelago auction house. Ibusu was a captain who was trading with Doflamingo and Dressrosa, but since his ship was actually a trading vessel for a different kingdom, he might have just been cosplaying as a real captain, maybe. Crescent Moon Galley is an interesting one again because he was only recently made a canon character, but he actually predates One Piece properly because he was the main antagonist of the first Romance Dawn prototype story that Oda wrote. Hippie is one of the captains listening to Vegapunk's message here. This loser from Robin's backstory is Chesquipa, who brought her into the world of piracy. Another backstory pirate is Blue Jam from Luffy, Ace, and Sabo's past, who was defeated by the dream team of Ace and Dadan. And then we have Vendor Decken. no, not that Vanderdecken that we see in Fishman Island, who's not that important either. That's Vanderdecken the Ninth. This is the OG, the first captain of the Flying Dutchman. But unfortunately, we also have to talk about Vanderdecken the Ninth, so welcome to a segment I'm calling What Am I Even Doing Here?, where there are some significant characters, but just why? Okay, this pirate captain and known predator was the second antagonist of the Fishman Island arc who actually teamed up with Hody Jones. And how do I put this? This guy was not a great captain, right? His crew is surprisingly loyal to a massive creep, but he's got an inflated ego, thinking he'd be stronger than Jinbei, which is hilarious, and he even abandoned Wadatsumi, calling him a sacrifice. Dude, how could you do that to the little to the little big guy? And then all right. Buggy. What are you even doing out there, right? Like, this man has been a warlord, he's a Yonko, and even he could not tell you why. Does he have an underlying loyalty of a ton of followers? Yeah, but through nothing but sheer accident and luck, really. And he simply doesn't have the real courage of a true captain. He's a coward and leads his men with nothing but false bravado. However, now that he's resolved to find the One Piece and maybe has some ties to Roxy Zebek, maybe Buggy will get some long overdue character development, because clearly he is one of Oda's favorite characters. After all, he's even got Crocodile and Mihawk on his side now. He's definitely not their captain, even if the world might think that, and now's a great time to also note that the Croc and the Hawk aren't on this list either, because they're not really captains, are they? And while we're at it, I'm not even sure they ever were. I mean, on the one hand, you've got Mihawk, the man that absolutely rides solo, so can you really call yourself a pirate captain if you've got no crew to speak of? And then Crocodile has this mysterious mafia boss thing going on in Baroque Works where people didn't even know he was the leader. I mean, sure, he was a Shichibukai, but you couldn't really call Baroque Works a pirate crew per se, I think. I don't know, let me know what you think. Then there's Foxy, who just coasting out there on nothing but Davy Backfight wins. He doesn't earn his crewmates, he wins them through cheating at competitive sports. And I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say, you're probably not a great captain if half your crew doesn't even want to be there and they're kind of like forced there by superstition and the Davy Backpact. However, that kind of leads us all the way over here to the other big Davy Backfighter, Rox D. Zebek, or shall I say, Davy D. Zebek. That's right, now we're finally in the top tiers of piracy again. The next captains are the greatest of all time, and they're the ones who Luffy's actually gonna have to surpass at some point if he wants to truly earn the title of Pirate King and best captain of all time. And Davy D. Zebek is an absolute legend. Unlike Foxy, he actually wins his Davy Backfights fair and square through nothing but his own immense and ridiculous strength. And really, you just have to be an outsized personality with some insane willpower and strength to band the likes of Kaido, Big Mom, Shiki, and Whitebeard all in the same crew. However, he's not an ideal captain either. He definitely doesn't have the loyalty of all of these powerhouses. Of some, but not of all. I mean, a lot of them signed on after losing in the Davy Backfight, but that doesn't prevent them from backstabbing and betraying each other constantly, and Shiki really didn't seem too mad at all about declaring that the Rocks pirates were now over after God Valley, as all of these pirates just scrambled to get as much treasure as they could and hightail the heck out of there. On the other hand, Zebek very much has a clear goal that he's striving towards. He's not out for riches, he's aiming for the world itself in the form of fulfilling the will of Davy and pulling Imu right off that big empty throne. Now, did he fail? Yes, but his legend does live in our hearts, and I would say to this point, he's probably the single strongest pirate captain that we have seen in the story. And Zebek's big young prodigy is next. Kaido, yet another fearsome Emperor of the Sea, and I'd say that he probably beats out Big Mom as a captain because he's not sucking out his own crewmate souls just because he's like hangry. In fact, he doesn't even often kill his own enemies, preferring to break their spirits and will and recruit them into his own crew. You kind of have to make him really angry and defy his principles directly, like how he killed Kurozumi Higurashi for interrupting his duel with Odin. Because if we've learned one thing, there's very little that Kaido cares more about than a good, clean, and fair fight, measuring who's the more broken person. And he kind of runs his crew this way as well. The Beast Pirates, fittingly, have a whole lot of survival of the fittest, might makes right kind of thing going on. And the strongest members of his crew are promoted up through the hierarchy, and he does seem to genuinely care about some members of his crew. I mean, he was not happy when Jack was defeated by the Scabbards, and he and King were pretty much bros for life. That being said though, he was of course far from being the best captain. I mean, Kaido's drinking problem often sent him out of control, causing massive damage to his own territory, and he also didn't really care for the smaller fries at all. Similar to Big Mom, just not as bad. And while he's good to most of his crew, I'm just gonna say the entire existence of the Pleasurers, his crewmates who ate defective devil fruits, smile fruits, is just beyond messed up, man. Now, Shanks is undeniably one of the greatest captains in the series, right? He's an Emperor of the Sea, he's undeniably powerful, able to one-shot characters as strong as Kid, and his hockey feats are simply unparalleled. His crew is also on a completely different level, with Yasob one-shotting Bartolomeo's entire ship and Ben Beckman leaving entire admirals quaking in their boots. He's also quite capable of plenty of strategic thinking, since he has some active plan in motion to go after the One Piece, and has actively been warning people about Teach for ages. Whitebeard, the government, everyone. He also managed to somehow steal the Nika fruit from ZP0, though he wasn't able to stop Luffy from eating it, but hey, you can't stop fate, right? It's just really hard to get a real grasp on what his plans are, since the guy has like 5 minutes of screen time in the entire show so far. But what probably makes it the most difficult to assess his skills as a captain is just how chill he and his crew overall are. I mean, the red hair pirates seem way more into drinking and having a good time than hunting down treasure, but now that they're actually gearing up properly for the endgame, I do think that we'll get a much clearer picture of Shanks as a leader very soon, especially as we learn more about his relationship with his Celestial Dragon family. So even though he's in the conversation for best captain ever, I think, there are just a few candidates that I personally think still outdo him. However, that could 100% change once he actually takes center stage in the final saga, and we hopefully learn more about him. And here comes my first very controversial sleeper pick for one of the greatest captains in the story ever, Fisher Tiger. I think with the general distaste for the Fishman Island arc, people forget what an absolute iconic character Fisher Tiger really was. Even greater than his successor, Jinbei, Fisher Tiger founded the Sun Pirates. This crew of fishmen were absolute liberators. This is the man who, after Emeth, was bold enough to climb the Red Line with his bare hands, break into Marizua, and set a whole lot of slaves free, including a young boy Hancock and her sisters. This is just a man of unmatched conviction who used the Sun Pirates brand to create equality between members who were former slaves and those who weren't, protecting them from recapture by the world government and the Celestial Dragons. And this very empathy even extended to Koala, the future Revolutionary Army member, who became the only human to ever sail with the Sun Pirates, and he inspired his entire crew, perhaps to a greater degree than any other captain ever has, because they were fighting for a cause greater than the crew, greater than the captain, greater than everything collected in itself, the right of fishmen overall and freedom of slaves. He really just had one fatal flaw that he also very much knew about, which was that he couldn't overcome his own prejudice and accept a blood transfusion from a human. A prejudice that, of course, Jinbei then later did overcome with Luffy. However, I kind of wish that we could have seen what Fisher Tiger might have accomplished in the future if he'd actually survived and the Sun Pirates hadn't fractured in the big conflict that then happened between Jinbei and Arlong. He straight up might have just become the greatest of all One Piece captains ever, kind of like Goldie Roger. I mean, it's hard to say anyone's a greater captain than Roger. After all, this is the man who ended up becoming King of the Pirates. He accomplished what no one ever had before and reached Laugh Tale, and alongside with Garp, he took out Rocks at God Valley, he battled the likes of Shiki and Whitebeard to become the most legendary pirate in history maybe, and when he faced down death, he used his execution to launch the Great Pirate Era, allowing a whole new generation to rise up in search for the world's ultimate treasure. And of course, he's been compared to Luffy a bunch as well. However, now that we've actually gotten a good real look at Roger with the entire God Valley flashback, can I really say that Roger is the best captain? Putting it mildly, Roger is, how do I say this? Not exactly what I expected him to be. I mean, at the time of God Valley, he was kind of a clown, down bad to a ludicrous degree for Shaggy, kind of a goofball really, who reminds me a little bit of the casual leadership style of Shanks and Luffy, and obviously his crewmates like Rayleigh and Scopper have a great lot of respect and close friendships with their captain, but at this point at least he's not really screaming leadership quality, but this might have changed later. And I do have to give a quick honorable mention here to also the first pirate ever, Joy Boy. Now, technically not confirmed as a captain, but come on, I think we can go out on a limb here and say that he probably had a crew, and if so, he was probably the captain. And honestly, you can't knock his achievements. Joy Boy has insane haki, we know this. He has some ride or die, probably crewmates like Zunisha or Emeth. He's the one who left the One Piece itself on Laugh Tale, and pirates just wouldn't exist without him at all. But we just don't know much about him at all yet, but once we get that Void Century flashback, fingers crossed, I'm very sure he'll like shoot up in the rankings or down. Who knows? Maybe he was a really bad guy. But there is someone that I won't even hesitate to say does take that top spot, and if you've been paying attention, you know exactly who it is, because he's the only captain that I haven't already talked about, even though I have mentioned him at least a dozen of times, just because that's how big of an effect he's had on the entirety of the One Piece world. And that person is, of course, no one other than the world's strongest man, Edward Newgate, Whitebeard himself. Does this man have the power? Oh, I'm sorry, does the title World's Strongest Man not kind of spell that out for you? This dude's power is stupid, especially in his prime. Does he have the courage? Well, this man was stabbed and shot hundreds of times, but never ever once in his life did he take a scar on his back. This was not a man who backed down from a challenge, even if it was a demon rocks coming straight at him. Can he strategize? Well, I mean, who needs strategy when you can destroy the entire world with a punch, but even still, he does. Did you see that master plan to submarine his entire fleet into Marineford to set up the war to rescue Ace to go around and, launch a surprise attack? Yeah, I think that speaks for himself. But does he have the crew? Marco Polo the Phoenix, Ace, Izo, Jozu, Vista, these guys are all crazy. Also, I mean, do the Whitebeard Pirates at this point just have the most dead characters of any crew also? Great record. I'm gonna wait and see if Jozu and Vista are actually dead before I determine that, because we do know how Oda does things, but still. Does Whitebeard have loyalty and respect? Well, other than a couple of very treacherous traitors like Blackbeard and Squard, there are people all over the New World and the regular Grand Line who came to risk their lives for him and his crew. But does he have the will, the conviction, the dream? I mean, the guy didn't even claim the One Piece. He's not king of the pirates, so how could he be the best? Well, because that wasn't his dream. He had a dream, and this man achieved it quite early. What Edward Newgate really wanted his whole life was family. And he didn't have crewmates. Whitebeard had sons. His crew, much like the Straw Hats, truly were his family. But how does Whitebeard actually stack up power-wise, right? Does he live up to the name of World's Strongest Man? Because, as we know, the power scaling in One Piece is actually kind of insane, especially lately, which is why I broke it all down, ranking all of One Piece's strongest characters by their power levels in this video right here. It's a wild one, go check it out. Otherwise, thanks to all of our fantastic Patreons. Again, check that out if you're interested. Really can't tell you how much I appreciate your support, whether you support on Patreon or whether you just watch these videos and leave a like or a nice comment. And I will see you, hopefully, in the next video.